Right, this morning we're finishing Mark chapter 5, which is very amazing. We're going to finish an entire chapter in 2 weeks. I did the math and I added up the other chapters over the weeks and did the average, and it was 4.5 weeks per chapter, so 2 is fast. But Mark set it up this way. He's just got 2 stories here. And so we're going to start off by just reading. So this will be verses 21 to 43, which will finish out the chapter. All right. Starting in verse 21. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." And he went with him. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and he went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. So we have 2 connected stories here. They're intertwined with each other. One of them interrupts the other one, which then, of course, makes that first one have a greater impact at the end. And so you can see already the makings of this plan of God, just like with the storm, how Jesus directed them onto the water in the evening so that they would come into contact with this storm, so that he could stop the storm, so that he could show his power. We see that there's a purpose in this interruption. There's a design. The delay here has purpose. There's a reason it was set up this way. God is behind it. And then these stories also add on to the last 2 stories. Right? They come together as more evidence for the deity of Jesus. Again, Mark's task is proving Jesus to be the Messiah and God in the flesh. That's what he starts out as. He claims that, and over again in these back-to-back, quick transitioning stories, he shows that. And here he's got 3 in a row. And so I want to show the connection between these 3. So we have the storm, and then we have the demon-possessed man, and then we have these 2 healings. And so I said last week that the storm showed Jesus' power over the physical world, over nature, the things we can see and touch. And then the demon-possessed man, Jesus shows his authority over the spiritual realm, the unseen world behind everything, the demons, these spiritual beings. And then now we have another piece of the puzzle, which is the world of disease and death. Right? So in this culture and at this time in history, disease and death was a true mingling of the physical world and the spiritual world. Because when you were sick, when you were diseased, it wasn't just seen as, you have some germ or you have some virus, but it was a physical manifestation of something going on in the spiritual. A spiritual problem, a spiritual curse, which would manifest itself as a physical ailment. And so it was this mingling of physical and spiritual together. So Jesus, as we see in this story, also has full authority over this realm as well. So we've got the physical world of nature, the things you can see and touch. You've got the spiritual world, which is just demons and spiritual beings and possession. And then we've got the mingling of the two in disease and death. And Jesus is above that as well. Who has authority over the physical world? Complete and full power over it. Only God does. Who has authority over the spiritual world? Only God does. Who has authority over the human body? The sickness and disease and death? Only God does. And Mark is showing us that Jesus has this authority. So he's just buffering this claim over and over again, proving it. So we'll start with the woman. She's suffering from a hemorrhage. And with her, we can clearly see this intertwining. Because just like with the leper, she's going to feel these physical effects of her ailment, but she's going to feel the effect spiritually in her life because she's ceremonially unclean because of it. So this is 12 years that she cannot go to the temple and worship. The heart of the Jewish society, being able to go to the temple and worship and offer your sacrifices and join in the feasts, she can't do any of it because she's unclean continually and she can't get clean. So she's completely cast out of spiritual life. We don't know if she's married, but probably not because it's saying that she's using her own money to try to pay for this. But she can't become married. So she's alone in a society that's very male-oriented. She's alone, and then, of course, because it's a disease, she's going to be seen as a pariah, like a leper. Because this is a spiritual curse also. It's not just a physical ailment. So she's pushed to the fringes of society. Not only that, but she's been paying physicians and used up all of her money that she might have had or that she was able to make, and it's only made it worse. And they're not going to put the blame on the physicians, but they're going to see that if a physician can't even heal her, that's much more evidence that this is spiritual. This woman is cursed. This is the reason this can't be healed. And so she would be even more pushed, isolated. So this is her life for 12 years. So in her desperation, like the leper, she risks coming into contact with people, touching them. This is against the law because she's going to make them unclean. But she's risking it because she has hope. She has hope in this man that she's heard about, that she can do these amazing things. And so she comes to him and she's rewarded. She's healed. And then Jesus stops the crowd, which is in a hurry. They're trying to get to Jairus' house because his daughter's about to die. It says she's at the point of death. And Jesus stops and says, "Who touched me?" And it's this kind of funny part of Scripture. But the disciples basically rebuke him. But if you put yourself in their shoes, it's understandable. Because up to this point, every interaction that Jesus has had with Jewish leadership has been negative. They confront him. They question him. We've already read that they are doing everything they can to seek to destroy him. And now we have a leader of a synagogue who's trusting in him. And so the disciples who believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and in their eye, the Messiah is going to save them from the oppression of the Romans. He's going to become their king. He's going to be the representative of all the Jewish people. They have a chance to have a Jewish leader on their side. All of the Jewish leaders have been completely against Jesus, and now they have this chance. If Jesus goes to the house and heals their daughter, you can imagine them thinking, this is great for our cause. And now he stops in the middle of a rushing, hurrying to get there with people all around him, and he says, "Who touched me?" And they're like, "What? What do you mean who touched you? Probably every single person here has touched you. We're in a rush, and everyone's around you. Why are you stopping? We have to get to his house." Jesus ignores them. The thing is, the disciples don't know about this woman. They don't know that this woman is amongst them. They don't know her story. They're going to learn it. because she's going to come and tell the truth. But they don't know what's happened. They don't know that power has gone out from him. And I'm taking this as a little side sermon. We don't know everything. Jesus does. But we don't know everything. Ever. We don't know what's going on with the world. We don't know what God is planning. We don't know what God is doing. So they don't know about the woman. They don't know that power has gone out from Jesus. They see a situation from their own perspective. They're right with Jesus and they don't know what's going on. How much us? So they don't realize also that this interruption is going to bring God more glory. Not only is he going to just heal a daughter, but he's going to raise one from the dead because of the delay. They don't know all these things. So I feel like this is a message for us that we have to trust God's plan and purpose. We have to be able to pray, I don't understand what's going on, but I trust you. Because we've seen it. The disciples were confused and bewildered. Why would you stop? Why would you ask a question like that? They didn't realize this beautiful story that was about to play out. They didn't know everything. So he ignores their rebuke. The woman comes forward because he calls her out. She tells the whole truth. And then we get this verse 34, which is just great. Verse 34. I'm on the wrong page. All right. Verse 34. And he said to her, daughter. He said to her, daughter. You have to remember, this woman has been a pariah in isolation for 12 years. Disowned by her community. Not welcome anywhere. And Jesus claims her. He says, daughter. A daughter is someone who is loved, who is cared for, who is taken care of. He has just in a moment completely transitioned her from nothing, purposeless, to a daughter, to someone who has an identity. So he changed her life in that moment right there. Then he says, your faith has made you well. And this is good because we don't want to start trusting in relics, right? It wasn't the cloth. It wasn't Jesus' magic robe because it touches him that healed her. It was her faith that healed her. The touch didn't heal her. He can heal someone from miles away. He can heal someone with his word. He doesn't need them to touch his magic cloth. But it was her faith, her belief. And he says, your faith has made you well. What would seem to be, after this, a typical greeting, just a typical, like what we would say, have a nice day. He says, go in peace. This is huge. Go in peace. She hasn't had peace for 12 years. She's had the opposite of peace. And he says, you can now go in peace. Your life has changed. He's given her her life back. If we go back to the demonic man in the last passage, same thing with him. Both of these people were living, right? They were alive. He was living amongst the tombs as a wild man, completely ostracized from society. The same thing with this woman. Jesus gives them their life back. They're basically the living dead. And they come to Jesus and he gives them their life back. They can go and live and have purpose and have reason and be in community again. So he doesn't just heal their ailment, but he gives them everything back. And then we go back to Jairus. At verse 35, it says, while he was still speaking, meaning while he was still talking to the woman who he just healed, Jairus gets the news. Someone says, your daughter's dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? And so in the midst of this interruption, Jairus learns that his last desperate attempt to save his daughter has failed. And what we learn is that it does say that his daughter was at the point of death. That's what he tells Jesus. But I mean, she was at the point of death. They had already hired the professional mourners because they're already there when Jesus gets there. This was certain death. They knew the girl was going to die. They were just waiting for it to happen. Professional mourners were basically a cultural requirement. You can actually go back and look at documents from that time. And at minimum, they had to hire 2 people to play the flute and 1 lady to wail. And if you were richer, there was more because you were expected to purchase more. And so this was a ruler of a synagogue. He would have had some wealth. And so when it says that Jesus goes into a commotion, it's because he's hired a lot of mourners wailing outside of this house. But they were already hired because they knew this girl was going to die. There was no hope. And so when you think about that, think about how the family's at the house waiting for this girl to die. And the dad, knowing that he could miss his daughter's last moments, knowing that he wouldn't be there with her mother to comfort, leaves. He leaves the house, risking not being there for that, to go and find Jesus. And now he finds out that she did die. He did miss it. He wasn't there. And he's watching Jesus heal someone else and call her daughter while it happens. And we don't know his response at all. We don't hear from Jairus again at all. Does he believe that Jesus can raise her from the dead? We don't know. But he did believe that Jesus could do something miraculous, because we do know that she was at the point of death and he sought Jesus out. And Jesus honors that, because what does he say? Do not fear. Do not fear, only believe. I mean, and at this point, what does the man have to fear? He just has the news that she's gone. To him, it's over. But he says, do not fear, only believe. So here's the thing with faith that is so important to remember, is that faith, your faith is only strong if what you have faith in is strong. It's the object of your faith that matters. Your faith doesn't matter how strong your faith is. You can have all the faith in the world when you're about to go across a rickety suspension bridge made of old ropes and wood planks like they do in movies so often. You can have all the faith in the world that that thing's going to hold you up, and then you walk on it and it breaks, because the thing has to have the strength, not your faith. And his faith is in Jesus, who has proven worthy of faith. And so even if his faith that he did have in Jesus at the last moment seems like it's completely gone because he hears these words, who he had faith in is still strong and is still there. And he says, do not fear. Do not fear, only believe. So Jesus goes, he casts aside these professional mourners. And then here is an interesting thing to me. He's redefining death. Because I kind of always wondered at this point, as like a young person who was like seeing the rules. And Jesus says to them, she's not dead, she's only asleep. And I'm thinking, but she is dead. So is Jesus saying a lie? Because I thought he couldn't do that. Are y'all nervous? I'm just kidding. But Jesus is redefining death because resurrection is possible with him. So death is no different than sleep now. For those who have faith in Jesus, death is no different than sleep, because we will wake up again in eternity. So when he says she's not dead, she's only sleeping, he could say that because he's about to wake her up. To a human, she's dead, but not to God. So he's like, she's only asleep. So he goes up there and he takes her hand and he lifts her up. And here we have it again. Only God has the authority to raise the dead. Only God has authority over disease. Jesus is doing it. Jesus is God. And this isn't a ghost, right? She's fully well. And she's not just made well enough to be back alive and laying in the bed sick. She's fully well. She's up walking, and she's even hungry. He says, get her something to eat. She's healthy and hungry. She's back to the way she was before. He didn't just raise her so she could be sick some more. He raises her all the way up, says she's well, get her something to eat. It's great. But I want to go back and look at just two things in the stories, the two interactions, to define what faith is. So, with Jairus, we see three things. He goes directly to Jesus to meet him face to face, right? His faith is defined by action. Face to face, he says, I need you. Then in humility, he acknowledges Jesus' preeminence. He falls to his feet before Jesus. He gives him honor and authority. He says, you are superior. He gives him that. And then he trusts him. It says he earnestly says, lay your hands on her so that, not and maybe, so that she may be well and live. He trusts in Jesus. So his faith is marked by coming to Jesus, bowing down before him and acknowledging his superiority, and then trusting in him fully. It's an active, deliberate faith that he's living out. When you read the letter of James, You see that true faith is never merely belief. It is belief, but it's never merely belief. True faith is always paired with action. Our faith should be evident by how we live. You can't just say, I think ice cream is the best dessert in the world. And then when someone says, oh, have you had ice cream? And you say, no. But it sounds like a good idea. I've looked at the ingredients. You say it because you believe it. You have to know that it's the best because you've tasted it, which is why in Scripture we have this verse that says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Because taste is something tangible. It's real. It's something you do. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Faith is lived. It's embodied. It's not just like intellectual head knowledge, but it is belief, but it's belief that you walk in. And we see that in Jairus. And then we go to the woman's faith, which is a much different interaction initially, because she was being sneaky. She's like backhandedly trying to come in and just take advantage of Jesus. Like, if I could just maybe get close and touch him, he could just heal me and I can just walk away and he'll never know. Sneaky. She's not coming face to face. It's completely different than Jairus. But her faith is rewarded also. And so I love this story because it does not let us get the gospel backwards. Because all she needed to receive salvation from Jesus was belief in him. That is all she needed. All it is belief. I said it's never merely belief, but the belief is what saves her. And the reason I say save is because actually where it says your faith has made you well, in the Greek that word is sozo, which is the word for salvation. All through the New Testament, that's what word is used, for saved. Some translations do even say your faith has saved you. And then he later says, go in peace and be healed of your disease. This was a separate thing. Your faith has saved you. The important detail about this woman's faith is how she then responds to the power of Jesus. She had that initial spark of faith. She backed into it. Just this barely weak mustard seed of faith. But once she took hold and the power came into her and Jesus calls her, she then does come to him face to face. So she falls down. Like Jairus, she falls down. She's in fear and trembling. She's acknowledging the preeminence of Christ. And then she also trusts him completely because she confesses everything. She tells the whole story. She's not ashamed to tell the whole story in front of everyone because she's telling it to Jesus, who she trusts. So we have the same thing, response of her faith. She comes to him face to face. She bows down to him and she trusts him. We have this action. And there's a similarity between the two. And it's desperation. It's desperation. It was both of them had their last hope. Their one hope was going to be in this man Jesus. And this is what we have to have. It has to be desperation. And the way to have that desperation is we have to understand the severity of sin. We have to look at our sin and see how bad it is. Not bad individually in those sins, but how bad it is to sin in the face of a holy God who is perfect. Which is basically to say, every time we sin, in God's face, I don't care to do what you say. So we have to have this desperation of, we understand that this sin separates us from God, the only person who gives us life. We're spitting in his face by sinning. We have to understand how bad that sin is so that we are desperate for a Savior. And then we have faith that he is that Savior. And so in their desperation, they came falling down before Jesus. That's how their faith was not strong, but that's how their faith was so secure in the person of Jesus, because he was their only hope. Jesus has to be our only hope. We have to have that desperation in our faith for him the way they did. That's what connects both of them. So that's the gospel, that we come to Jesus exactly as we are, just like the woman. We receive his grace in faith, and then right action does follow that. Immediately after he calls to her, she comes, she bows down, she tells the truth. After he saved her, not before. We don't have to clean ourselves up to come to Jesus. He accepts us. This, like he said, insignificant faith, mustard-sized faith, mustard sized. You can have a lot of mustard seed sized. But she comes to him just like, I hope I can do this. And she doesn't want to be seen, but she still has faith. That's what matters. Faith in Jesus. She didn't come face to face like Jairus, all important. But the faith was the same. So Jesus has power over the physical, the spiritual, and disease and death. He is God. He's in control. But what I get from this a lot is that, and I talk about this a lot, but this is the world we live in, Jesus doesn't always stop the storm. In our story, he stopped the storm, but he doesn't always. He doesn't always heal the disease. We know that just from our prayer request today. He doesn't always. Like Paul's thorn, Paul asks for it to be taken. He says, no, my grace is enough. And that's okay, because this isn't the end. Jesus was showing us glimpses of eternity. This healing of this girl, of this daughter, this woman, the raising of the girl, these are showing us this is what it will be like. You will be well. You will be a son or a daughter forever. So because of the gospel, if we have faith, we will hear him tell us to rise. We will hear him call us daughter and son. We will be changed over to being, we are now changed over to being sons and daughters of the Most High. But in eternity, we will have that title forever. And so that's our ultimate hope. Jairus, in this story, is faced with the reality of certain death. They've already hired the mourners. He knows his daughter is going to die. And she does. And Jesus' words to him are, do not fear. After she's dead, do not fear, only believe. And that's the same message for us. Like we are faced with certain death, just like Jairus. Our life on earth feels long, can feel short. It is short in the perspective of history. We are facing certain death, but Jesus' words to us are, do not fear, only believe. Do not fear. So, and the reason we don't fear is because of who he is. Power over the physical, over the spiritual, over disease and death. Nothing is out of his control. So we can trust him. Do not fear, only believe. So let's pray.